should I have like Welcome to Media Path. I'm Louise Palanker.
And I'm Fritz Coleman.
Today on the show, we celebrate the importance of film to entertain, fascinate, and illuminate us. Our guest is filmmaker Meredith Yinger, whose latest work is called Scars Unseen. It takes us into the worlds of three women who have been through domestic violence and terror and come out the other side with a passion to help others do the same. Meredith has so much wisdom to share with us coming right up. But first, Fritz, I thought maybe we could talk about recent national developments.
I think there was a Shakespearean twist over the weekend. I mean, I was really depressed coming out of the Republican convention because I thought, his speech just represented everything I hate about this country.
You listened to his speech?
Yeah, it was a train crash. I couldn't help myself. And then suddenly Sunday, the sun shone again. And I was so happy. But what really made me happy was the way not only the party, but the country and hopeful people seemed to coalesce around this woman. And I really think we have much more hope in our country this week than we had last week.
Yes, but I still am in mourning because I am a Joe person.
Oh, no,
so
that's absolutely true.
I feel sad. I feel like there's a lot of people at a funeral going, yeah, but isn't it great that he's dead? You know, I mean, like, there's still a period of mourning. I still feel like that Joe, I think he's going to get all of due respect as being such
he's been getting it already.
A wonderful statesman and being the real deal in terms of what we think we're voting for, but we rarely get. And in that man, we got it.
Well, 1,000%.
And
everybody says, even people that know, even people like the historians they have, Beschloss and all the guys on MSNBC, all say that this man, because of his record, will go down as one of the most productive presidents in the 20th century, 20th and 21st century. So I think he's already beginning to be iconized.
Yeah, he can probably spell it too.
Yeah, he could probably
even pronounce
better
it.
Than the other guy.
But maybe we could go to the young people. We have our engineers, we have Raph and Mason, and of course we have our young guests. So I thought maybe we could get some various points of view as to what has recently transpired.
And it doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with this, guys.
Mason?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm a little nervous personally as to Kamala's winning chances this year. Mm-hmm. Personally, I don't have very high hopes. Not that I have anything personally against her, but just from the people I know, it seems she's not very popular, and of stuff, just general zeitgeist stuff, it seems.
And why do you suppose she's not popular?
At least I feel like a lot of younger people don't like her because of her history as the California DA. The common quote being that she's a cop.
Yes, but Trump is a criminal.
Yeah, that, you know what? But Mason's not alone in that thought process.
I know, and I'm happy he's sharing it.
I'm glad you brought it up. But I will say, under these particular circumstances, I think somebody with her prosecutorial skills is very necessary to get to the bottom of what's going on. It may not work with another person, with a pacifist or somebody who's left, somebody from the left who's not as far left as her. I just think that skill will play well right now.
And I was also telling Mason before the show, I go, she's not the kind of cop that was like arresting and indicting the wrong person. She's a California cop where it's like, hey, you slow down. You can't cross there. I mean, that's those are our crimes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know that the hellscape that they paint California as in the right
was so bad.
It's
in
just
Trump's
not
speech. It was so. I said, what country are you living in?
It's not. If you come to California, you won't see people just breaking into jewelry stores.
Well, yes, you will. But
that's just you.
Not in this
on a given Friday. No.
But I listened to her speech today in Wisconsin, which is a pivotal state, and the energy was unbelievable. And her ability to smile and deliver a positive message, I think people are dry sponges waiting to absorb that.
Well, what about you, Raph?
Honestly, I'll be the optimist in the room. I'm incredibly excited by this revelation. To me, this is the sort of kick in the ass the Democrats needed. It's the first time that I feel that we've had some drive and excitement and forward momentum in the election. Not just everyone endorsing her and all the, record donations being given within this past week. Mm-hmm. I think it was very clear that as much as I admire Biden, he was obviously I think, too forward in age to be able to handle both the campaign and the remainder of his term. So I do think that with Harris, along with a strong VP, because so many people right now will just vote anti-Trump. So I do think that now that we're past the Biden's too old, I don't think there's that much stopping the Democrats from winning.
I love to
Well said, Raf.
Raf, that's well said. I think for President Biden that he's probably for the next 4 years would have still been the very best at presidenting, but at campaigning, he never was that good. It just was never his thing because he's run for president a lot before, and he would have been the best president at any of those given moments. But campaigning is just something that hasn't really been his oration hasn't been. He's got a lot to say and a lot of wisdom.
Stutters, and we're a shallow country that's all about perception. We need somebody with vigor and energy, and that's what I thought when I saw her today. God bless him. He's a wonderful guy. Just sit in the throne now and let people praise you for 5 months. But
he's a doer. He's not going to just sit around.
No,
and get
he'll finish his program.
Let's hear what
now that he has the Supreme Court on his side, maybe he'll do stuff like, because he has there's no price to pay for whatever you want to do, since the Supreme Court said the presidents can't be held accountable. Hire 3 more judges.
Pardon Hunter. Meredith, ahead of your introduction, we'll just break norm here and get your view on
I think, as we all know, the status of our systems are broken. And I think that we're at a very interesting point where it's time and people are slowly starting to realize that we do need to have our politicians be held accountable. Obviously, that was disproven by what happened. We do have a felon that is potentially going to be our president. So I think anything that we can do to hold people accountable and to really break down the systems and figure out, okay, where is the money going, right? Because money talks, and money clearly has been a big underlying factor as to whose policy gets passed, what is getting attention.
The biggest mistake made by the Supreme Court was the Citizens United thing. It may have ruined American politics.
It wasn't
forever.
a mistake from their point of view. They did it very, very purposely.
Yeah.
So Fritz and I have something we wanted to talk to you about, and we're doing it at the top of the show in light of recent events. We've created a web hub to help you shop for gifts and save democracy in one fun stop. Giftofdemocracy.com is a directory pointing you towards candidates and causes committed to protecting and defending our democracy. Here, you browse for fun, swaggy merch for the loved one on your shopping list. Fritz and I make no money here, but I am a No, sorry, Fritz. Yeah. I mean, that was just some sort of scheme that we're going to send you, the way of Bob Menendez. So just cool it.
I know.
Cool your jet. But I am a proud daughter of Williamsville, New York. Go Billies. And around those parts, if another kid took issue with your shenanigans, we would say in retort, it's a free country. Well, we would like it to stay that way for our kids and our grandkids and our nieces and nephews and for every young person we love and would love if we got to know them. Our site points you towards the merchandise and donate pages of worthy candidates and causes. It's the donation that counts. Democracy makes a great gift. You will find the link in our show notes, giftofdemocracy.com. So, okay, Fritz, what are you recommending for us this week?
One of your spectacular organizational skills was putting that whole thing together.
Oh, I had a lot of help. I have Judy and I have Ashley, so we're a good team.
Oh, good. Well, I'm going to talk this week about a movie that's been out for a while. It's been out since 2016, but I'd never seen it or even heard about it. I caught it by accident on Turner Classic Movies. It's called Olympic Pride and American Prejudice. It's also available on Prime and YouTube. I thought since the Olympics start this Friday, this would be something good to reflect on heading into the Olympics. This film is about African Americans who defied Hitler and Jim Crow to win hearts and medals at the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. Hitler thought it'd be a great idea, a great public relations coup for the Nazis to hold the Olympics in Germany. It would also give the Germans a chance to prove the superiority of the Aryan race in the field of athletics. Didn't play out that way, but it was a good shot. This also set up a great irony. These 18 black athletes featured in this film were representing a country that thought of them as second-class citizens during that year and sent them to compete in a country that thought they shouldn't even exist. And those 18 black athletes won 14 medals, 8 of them gold. This was a quarter of the medals won by the entire American team. Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals. Hitler had rolled out the red carpet for the black Americans, but was not happy when they started kicking butt in the competitions. And to Hitler's horror, Jesse Owens became a hero of the Olympics, even to German citizens. And here's the sort of disturbing side issue. In order for the IOC, the Olympic Organizing Committee, to agree to allow the Olympics to happen in Berlin, the Germans had to promise that Jews would be allowed to compete on the German team. So the Americans came up with this hideous term, token Jew. That meant as long as one German Jew was allowed to compete in the Olympics, that met the threshold, which is just awful. And she was 26-year-old Helene Mayer, who ended up winning a silver medal in fencing. The film will really make you reflect on the determination of the black athletes. They had to compete to win medals while proudly representing a country that didn't completely accept them as citizens in a country that didn't accept their humanity. Very touching. I recommend it before the Olympics.
The young woman who won that medal in fencing, did she make it through the war?
That's a very good question. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
We'll look that up.
But one, that's awful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I am going to talk about a little show called Trying. It's a sweet little British show starring Esther Smith and Rafe Spall as Nikki and Jason, a disarmingly delightful couple attempting to start a family. When pregnancy fails them, they apply for adoption and row furiously in that direction for a couple of seasons before they arrive at any children. That long and difficult journey may feel very familiar to folks who have traveled through it. Nikki and Jason are surrounded by a quirky cast of friends and family who support hopes and nurture disappointments. The struggles and situations are too relentlessly charming to be lifelike, but they are relatable, and it may inspire you to find humor in your own despair when dreams are dashed and rerouting is required. Fast forward to avoid an upcoming spoiler, because I'm about to lay a couple on you, or just hit pause. I have just begun season 4, which skips ahead to 6 years later, probably because teenagers are sassier and more dramatic, and in show business, you can work them twice as long. In other words, they adopt the children, they've got the children, and then season 4, which has been long awaited by fans, starts, and 6 years have passed, and now the kids are teenagers. And you need to be seated for this part of the story. The reason Nikki and Jason are able to gaze at each other so adoringly is because they are really good actors, and they were in the process of falling in love in real life, right? The two stars are currently expecting a baby, which they're going to put up for adoption. So some other happy couple.
Love this show. On your recommendation,
you watched it
I
last
watched
night?
3 episodes. First of all, you just want to hug these people. They're the cutest couple on the planet. The writing is so funny and spectacularly intelligent. But you're right about one thing. I had to put the subtitles on because it's a lot of fast Liverpudlian banter back and forth, and you can't understand what the hell they're saying. But it's really a wonderful show. I didn't realize they were in 4 seasons. I'm only on episode 3 of season 1, and I'm in love with the show.
It's just so adorable.
It's really good.
Yes, so engage your subtitles for the fullest amusement, because these people are funny, but they speak rapid British, and you don't want to miss any of it. Great writing, wonderful performances. This show is just brimming with love, and I am highly recommending it. Trying is on Apple Plus.
It's one of my favorite new shows now, seriously.
Oh, I'm so happy.
And I'm a tough nut to crack.
Yeah, you are. You're very different.
Introduce our guest. She's getting bored.
Oh, our guest. Yeah, we have guests right here. Yeah, Trying. Meredith Yinger is a filmmaker, documentarian, and the owner of She TV, a female-led full-service video and virtual event production company. She is the director of her newest project, Scars Unseen, which takes us into the lives and work of 3 inspiring women who have survived domestic violence and are now thriving in their efforts to pave a path forward for others. Welcome, Meredith.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
I think this is a really important piece of work, Meredith. I really do.
Thank you. I think so too.
And I think you, and the reason why it's important, even more important than it normally would be right now, is for what you say. The issue of domestic abuse falls into what's called the shadow pandemic. Yeah. Describe what you meant.
So the shadow pandemic really came about because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The statistic previously to COVID was 1 in 4 women affected by domestic violence. And post-COVID, it went up to 1 in 3. Obviously, during lockdown, a lot of things were exacerbated, and a lot of women did not have physical escapes or places to go, to escape abuse. And so that statistic sadly went up and has become even more rampant than it was before.
And what led you to this this material?
Yeah, so this is a long, how much time do you have? This is a long process. I mean, it was 4.5 years from start till our screening at, Hollywood theaters. So, really, we initially met Trish, the founder of Safe Passage. So we were working with her nonprofit in creating video content. And initially we were like, we need to make a documentary just on Trish's life because her story is incredible and goes through insane hurdles, and then to see what she has built through this nonprofit for the last 23 years that she's been running this, we're just going to focus on Trish. And actually, through the process of filming at an event for Safe Passage, we met Maha, who was speaking at the event. And Maha's story also,
Holy cow.
Oh man,
Unbelievable.
harrowing.
You
Let
opened with
me make
Maha.
sure people are on the same page.
Yeah, yeah.
You introduce us to 3 women.
Yes.
Each have equally horrifying abusive situations, but coming from different areas.
Mm-hmm.
But the great and the positive conclusion is that part of their healing process was learning to help others heal. But I mean, Maha, forget about it. This woman, I'm going to let you tell the story, but she talked about life in Yemen, and women are subjugated. And she said, this is just a teaser, her mother was more abusive than her father was. Talk about Maha's story.
Yeah. So Maha's story, I mean, she grew up in a culture where it wasn't just the norm to have abusive parents but women in general are subjected to abuse on the street by strangers. That's the kind of culture and, environment that she grew up in and that she experienced. So she always explains, there was terror inside the house and outside of the house. It was just kind of constantly around her. And I mean, for her to grow up like that with her mom being more abusive than her father, but then obviously in the arranged marriages experiencing absolutely insane, terrifying, life-threatening experiences. I mean, the fact that she's alive to
Not
this
just getting
day
beaten,
is
but
just
being locked in a closet. And I mean, it was like they were like hostage situations.
Yeah, yeah.
Really, really breathtakingly bad circumstances.
And when you make the point in your film that abusers have been abused, and I think we all sort of know that instinctively, but when you see a culture like Yemen where abuse is so systemic, it's almost, I would have to say it's encouraged because that's how you keep women from having their own ideas about where they might want to go or who they might want to be.
Yeah.
So, and then everyone is wounded, boys and girls. So everyone has a lot of pain. And that pain, it's like energy. It doesn't just disappear magically. It has to go either inside or be directed outwardly.
Yeah.
And one of the not subtext, but one of the additional threads of your movie is, with all 3 of these women, is that the symptoms and the thread don't go away in your life, and sometimes repeat themselves in following generations.
Right. Right. And that leads me to Adrienne. And she very beautifully explains her experience of the cycle of abuse and also trauma, right? It's like a wave hitting you, going through you and spilling out onto someone else or in some other area of your life. And I really leaned into that as a visual representation. Stylistically, I felt like that was the most understandable way that I could kind of communicate how that could look like for people who maybe have never experienced it or had a friend or family member go through something like that, to have it be a wave and to understand that kind of recurrent theme and process that you go through over and over and over again, and how that plays into dealing with the trauma of it as well.
But most people who've been wounded in that way are not self-aware enough to say, I heard the sound of my voice and I actually couldn't believe it. Most people get very defensive about the way they've been behaving. She really has a rare ability to want to heal herself and then heal those around her.
Yeah.
She was the one of the 3 where you got to experience the emotions of these women, because hers were a little closer to the surface.
Yeah.
And her whole interview, she seemed like she was on the verge of tears, and even expressed that toward the end of your interview, she was having PTSD because she felt flashes in her neck, but her hands got cold, and you could see her having a triggering moment. And it was really, really fascinating and heartbreaking and interesting.
Yeah, I felt that, I mean, what was left in the film was a very shortened version, obviously, of it, but I felt that it was important to showcase the physical responses that trauma can have. And, you know, the body remembers, right? And I felt that was really important because of how she had walked me through what she does in her process and how she was able to keep going. And we only ever see the pretty, right? We only ever see the before and afters. And I felt it was really important to showcase that what it actually could look like. You know, might not be pretty, but it's like a miracle that her body is able to process what's happening, be reminded of all of the terrible things, and still be able to communicate without her throat closing up, without, you know, having to leave or having, you know, to stop what she's trying to communicate. And I felt like that was really beautiful. And maybe it's not the prettiest thing to watch, and sure, it's uncomfortable, but I felt like
Really
we
made the
need
point.
that.
Yeah.
How
Go
do
ahead.
we send the energy somewhere safe? We meet these three women and we hear these stories, but we don't necessarily see them working with other people.
That's a great question. Yeah, how they've actually worked and who they work with can vary depending on if that's Trish with, you know, women that come into Safe Passage and need, you know, immediate resources or job training or housing, and she kind of provides as like a branching off point of who she can bring in to kind of assist them and help them. And then Trish also comes from like a makeup and hair background, and she was a makeup artist for a lot of years, and she comes at it from the whole person approach, and she really focuses on, if I can make, you know, this woman feel confident and feel like a movie star, feel like $1 million, she's not going to go back to what she was. She's going to have no problem going out and getting a job interview, no problem like righting the wrongs or, you know, starting a new path. And I think that also it is different. And I think that that's important to show too, especially because Maha, how she works with people is through yoga and instruction in that sense. And that's a very physical release, right? Very different than maybe going through workshops or, you know, having therapy sessions. It's very different in how the body can like release that stress, relieve that tension. And then Adrienne more on a one-on-one basis because she's a somatic therapist and certified. And she also now is trauma recovery yoga certified. So she also works in that similar somatic experiencing way.
Explain somatic.
So somatic is basically like through the body and how the physical and nervous systems experience stress and trauma, and how you can notice the triggers, notice the feelings that are happening, and find ways and tools to like work through them.
And before we get off of Maha, there's sort of a secondary point that she makes in her experience, which is escaping Yemen and coming to the United States. And thanks to the good work done by the judge that wrote the laws that allowed her to seek asylum in the United States. I mean, that's just another example of, you know, one of the parties in this election, and we won't mention which, are so anti-immigrant. There are so many people that bless the United States for giving them the opportunity to escape what they had to in another country. Hers is a very touching story about that.
Oh, yeah.
The later let her get out of that circumstance and start a new life.
Yeah, and I think Judge even mentions in the film, you know, we have Maha in this wonderful story of how she was able to escape and utilize the asylum law. But he goes on, like, for every Maha, there's probably 20 people that we couldn't get out, that we couldn't help, and that we couldn't reach. And I think that, just to your point, is a huge problem in how public perceptions are of immigration and how people are coming here and what they're running from, right? What is it that is making it so life or death for them to become a citizen or to come to America? And I think Maha especially, she says, you know, I think that people who are born here take it for granted, right?
Absolutely.
Like how she lived in a society where it was so controlled. Her life was so controlled, and so there was so much violence and trauma just as a society. And then to come to America and have this moment of, I'm free, right? Like, what is that even?
I kept saying to myself, how is this the 21st century and this occurs in any culture?
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah, just the hopelessness of like knowing that. I mean, they tried to marry her off twice. Going home doesn't help her. They're just going to marry her off to someone even worse. There's nowhere you can go. There's no place to seek help. where's she going to find the American embassy? Maybe, I don't know, but there's just no place in Yemen where they care. A woman is sent back to her husband or back to her family. Like nobody cares. No one's helping you. And I just don't think that people in America are aware of how dire things are. I mean, we're working hard to protect women's rights here in America, but just know that they can de-escalate to that point where there is nowhere to turn. And that's a really scary concept, because if humans are capable of that in Yemen, they're capable of it anywhere. And we just always have to work and fight hard for people to be free and for people and children to feel safe.
A question a lot of people have is, why don't they just leave? And you go into that with several of them.
Yes.
Talk about that issue.
Yeah, we go into several of them. And our wonderful narrator, Rachel Louise Snyder, she says that if there's one thing that she could possibly do, in her career, would be to reframe that question and ask, why is that abuser violent in the first place?
If I could do one thing in my life to recalibrate that question, it would be why that abuser is violent in the first place.
Abuse and traumatic experiences, they like the shadows, they don't like the light. And people try and keep them in the shadows. We need to put light on it.
But I think also she goes on to make a really good point, and that's something that we wanted to bring, to the public's attention and to, top of mind, is that women leave all the time. It's not a one-off. People think of it as a one and done scenario. Like you just get in your car, drive away, and leave, and that's
It's a process.
Yeah, it's a process.
It reminded me of an addict. Addicts never get sober the first time. Sometimes they have to go 4 or 5 times, and they get a little farther away or stay away a little bit longer. And it seems to be that until they get their legs under them.
Totally. It's a process. And think of all of the things that you have to have lined up. And Adrienne kind of outlines what helped her, right? Like she had her own money. She had her own job. She had things that were kept separate, right? That allowed her to get an apartment or allowed her to have a separate space. And that's not necessarily the case for everyone.
No, because abusers will peel that away from you. As you move through that relationship, they start judging the way you look, the way you're presenting yourself. They don't want you to work. They don't want you to drive. Because they kind of know that the best way to control someone is to make them feel like they are useless and worthless without you. Also that, who else would love you kind of thing. It's so manipulative, but I think it's instinctive to them because they probably watched their father do that to their mother.
And there's a conundrum they have, and you bring it up in the movie, and that is that it's hard to leave if your abuser is also your provider of your life.
Right.
You have a husband who's buying you food and gives you a roof, so you have to make that fight with yourself.
And I think we mention it as well that the most dangerous time for a woman to leave a domestic violence situation is the act of them actually leaving. That is the most dangerous time. And that's when majority of women, that's when the abuse can escalate. That's when oftentimes a lot of women are killed. And I think that people also don't realize how big of a deal it is to leave or to start that process of leaving.
Especially if you have kids.
Especially if you have kids. And what do you do? How? Because then you're worrying about how do I keep everyone safe, right? And how can I make it out in a way that is not going to bring us back in immediately after?
What's the percentage of recidivism, like of two things, of an offender and also the person coming back? Is there a percentage of women on the average leave 3 times and come back, or is there any math concerning that?
That's a good question. I actually don't know. I'd have to check, but I know that the majority of women take multiple times to leave.
Abusers do what I call playing every note on the piano. And so you may get messages that are where he's crying, where he's screaming, where he's begging, where he's threatening suicide, where he's, because they know, they just kind of know, well, one of these is going to work. And it's so difficult for a woman to listen to that and not feel like she's responsible for him somehow.
Yeah, Adrian talked about that. Her I don't know if it was her boyfriend or her husband, the father of her child, got on his knees and is weeping.
Yeah.
And if you're weak and vulnerable and just want peace and quiet, it's easy to fall into that trap, I'm sure.
Right. Or if you have an emotional connection, right? You're in a loving, to a certain extent, relationship with someone. It's like emotional manipulation, right? They're really pulling at your heartstrings and calling up, like you're saying, every note in the book or everything that they can possibly do to have you come back.
Now, let's talk about the men for a moment. Do you know anything about men who have determined to change? They did grow up in an abusive situation. There's a reason why they behave in this way, but they want to change. Can they change if they really are self-aware and want to?
Yeah, Rachel actually does a lot of work in that department, and I think she goes into it in her book, No Visible Bruises, which is kind of funny that we found her with the very similar title of our documentary, and we had no idea before approaching her that she had, that was the title of her book, and she does talk a little bit about that, and she's done interviews and field work in, prisons and in systems where men are rehabilitating, and it is possible. Anything's possible. It's just a matter of, do they have the proper resources also available to them to have treatment, to treat themselves, right? Because hurt people hurt people. So if you're not healed, if you're not okay, if you're still suffering from what was done to you, it's almost really, really difficult to move forward and to not continue that same behavior or bring the cycle around again.
So let's talk about the PTSD and the after effects of an abusive life. You find that most women who, if they do the work, like Maha with the yoga and Adrian with the other cognitive stuff, that they're able to have a healthy emotional relationship with a man? Are they able to have a healthy, if they were abused sexually, are they able to have a healthy sexual relationship with a man after they've been through an abusive situation?
Well, I would say that it completely depends on every person, and I can't even begin to try and box them in as to what, the proper route is or how it looks like. But I will say that just from these ladies' experiences and what, they've shared with me, if you can get yourself to a healthy position, all of your relationships benefit. And the thing is, especially with the trauma-informed care angle and what Adrian's work is doing and kind of what we're trying to do with this film, is that we can come to each other at an understanding that we all have varying degrees of trauma, and how do we meet each other where we're at, right? And how can we have those open conversations, but also those boundaries to set and create those healthy and sustainable relationships when you are still recovering from something very traumatic.
Tell us about your process in capturing their stories and how delicately you had to go about that and how they responded to the opportunity to be so open.
I'm very fortunate that all of Adrian, Trish, and Maha were so open with me and so at a place in their lives where they're like, I'm not just ready, like I need to tell this story.
How did you find them?
So Trish, like I mentioned, we met her through her nonprofit and we were working with her. We were filming another event, and that's where we met Maha. And then Adrian actually found us through our crowdfunding campaign, which was, again, like with the serendipity, of Maha and Judge and Adrian finding us. Like, this project has just kind of attracted people, I think, that it was meant to. And Adrian found us, called, left a voicemail. We did some initial interviews, and she really wanted to be involved and was ready to share, her story. But I also approached every single conversation with them very much from a place of creating a safe space and only share what you feel comfortable with. Like, I'm not about trying to just get it for the scene, create drama that's unnecessary. And I really just wanted it to be true to how they wanted to share their stories and what they felt comfortable, in telling and sharing. And I think that's a very fine line to walk. And I am just so fortunate that they were receptive to me, and we created this relationship and established trust. And I was like honored and kept reminding them the whole time, like, I'm so fortunate to be able to tell your story and to help you tell your story, because we need to hear your stories. Like, the world needs to hear this, right? Like, if we're not even talking about this, how the heck are we going to change anything? How are we going to create, different conversations or different pathways if we can't even get over, the shock factor of what that happens? Yeah.
I think that if you can find a pathway to get this out to the general public, it's going to be a wonderful gift to many women.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing, and I think it was Adrian's story, is that sometimes the ripple effect, I guess this is all part of the PTSD, you find yourself having these symptoms way later in your life, like yelling at people for no apparent reason. This is unprocessed emotional stuff. And sometimes, and I everybody can relate to this, you choose a partner. Say if you had abusive parents, you choose a partner that sort of replicates the behavior of the person who was abusive to you in the first place, and you do it subconsciously. I'm so familiar with that. Picking somebody that sort of does the same behavior as somebody who was negative in your life.
Yeah.
It's familiar and/or
it's a familiar scenario.
and/or you feel it's what you deserve or what fits.
And you like she was talking about the way she was treating her daughter. She didn't even have any control over it. It was like muscle memory from her childhood, and she just started treating her daughter the same way.
Yeah. Started replicating that behavior. And Adrian is a true force. And like you mentioned, she had that awareness, right, to catch herself in the act, or to be like, what am I doing? What's happening? And take a step back and analyze and see how could she change that? What could she possibly do? Get therapy, and also help her daughter along, with therapy as well, and work together in order to work through what, they had both experienced.
Now, my theory is that the people who stormed the Capitol have been abused and/or are abusers.
It's a great theory.
And it's hard for people who have turned their hurt into rage to get help, because their He-Man persona is so personified that they will never allow the vulnerability required to get help.
Yes, some of that is cultural. The Yemen thing, and there's been a lot of discussion about the attraction that Trump seems to have to Latino populations because of the machismo in his presentation. There are cultural things that sort of permit men to treat their wives this way. And so that's a tough thing to fight, culture. When all of the men in your tribe or something, you treat their wives the same way, it's tough to get out of that.
Right. And right-wing, our current right-wing political culture is capitalizing on abuse cycles to indoctrinate and to weaponize voters and to keep people angry. And our leaders should be attempting to heal us and pull us together. The word united is in the name of our country. So I just don't know how we... Now, some of this is just so calcified, in families. And so I just don't know how we turn that around.
What about abused men?
Yeah. Well, I just really quickly, what you said made me think of something. I think as a culture and as a society, that's why this trauma-informed approach is so important, because our governments and our systems have been weaponizing fear for so long. And I think that goes hand in hand with abuse and how fear
1,000%.
Fear is the weapon, right? I mean, obviously there's other instances where physical weapons are used, but predominantly in all cases, fear, right?
100%.
Fear, and that goes on every single level. And I think if we can find a way to bring awareness, but then also to go beyond that and say, okay, what are we fearful of? What's holding us back? And why are these people in power so afraid of our power? Because I really feel that that's where it comes from. It's a fear of letting go, of people having their own agency, own power. The scariest thing to people right now seems to be women who know what they want and
maybe
go
a female
after what
president
they
will
want.
represent the alternative to that whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so, because it really is And that's the thing that I hang on to. And even in seeing these women and seeing how powerful they are coming through and going through the gauntlet, and how much fierceness and strength there is, that no wonder, like, if people all were able to change their narrative and step into their power, people oppressing would lose their power and they would be scared. Can I cuss?
Yeah.
They would be scared
Heck yeah.
shitless,
Right.
because that's us rising up, right? That's us taking on our own and starting a revolution in whatever way that looks like.
Yes, but I don't want it to be a war. I just want it to be a awakening that we are stronger together,
Yeah.
and that we are stronger building each other up. That actually, if you build up others, it gives you strength and power. So it's like, if we just take financially, for example, if everyone has a little bit more, they will come and frequent your business. They will buy your product. They will come to your restaurant. There's not a finite amount. It's if we all do better, we all do better.
Yeah.
Is sort of the way. I just want us to see each other as allies.
It's a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yes.
No, I'm with you on that. I think, yeah, if we could all understand that a rising tide lifts all boats and come from that mentality, things would be different.
But the whole other side is exactly what you said, is predicated on fear. And I listened to that speech at the convention because I couldn't help myself. But the whole thing is fear and negativity, and it doesn't represent the reality of the United States, but he wants you to be afraid of what the future is going to be.
Wait, so does he choose the battery or the shark?
Oh, that's a good
It's
question.
a spoiler alert for those of you that haven't.
No.
Yeah.
He chooses the cheeseburger. But let's go back to the other thing. Did you, in your discussions, hear anything about the abuse of men? Now, it's got to be different because men have more power than women. So I'm guessing a man who's being abused, that's kind of a localized thing. And because the power structure in the world is set up for men to succeed, they could be abusive for longer and under other circumstances. But there are men who are abused. Did you guys discuss any of that in the film at all?
Yeah, we briefly touched upon it. Just like I said, like hurt people, and domestic violence is not just affecting women, right? It affects men, it affects children, it affects people who are witness to it. In some sense, like psychologically, that also gets ingrained into your system. Maybe you weren't hit, but maybe you watched your mom get hit, right? Like that kind of exposure to it also takes a huge, huge toll. And yeah, there are, even in the process of making this film, I've met more and more people, and especially men, have come up to me after the screenings and said, hey, like, I had an emotionally abusive relationship, or I had this, and are coming forward. And I think that there's power in the story. And I hope that more people come forward.
You talk about how debilitating the stress of it all is and how it can rewire your brain. And that to where your brain is similar to that of a prisoner of war. Is there any correction for that? No.
No, and I think that statistic alone should be eye-opening to people, because a lot of times, women's pain or suffering is kind of, oh, they're dramatizing this. Oh, this is what's happening. But from like a neurological standpoint, that's how the brain is becoming rewired when you're exposed to that level of stress or that kind of trauma. I think that's huge.
Do you think the awareness about this is increasing in the United States? And are there enough resources for women to find, or are we lacking in that area too?
Well, it's definitely making headlines. I'm sure you've all been following. You probably saw the P. Diddy, tapes that resurfaced back from 2016. Just a month ago, the Supreme Court upheld the ban on domestic violence abusers not being able to own firearms. We've heard about it from the NFL, the MLB, every major, sports community has celebrity people coming forward with these types of cases. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's hushed. A lot of times people are paid off or silenced, with such large entities that have that power and have that control. So I know that it's coming, like especially like through this project, more and more things are coming out in mainstream media, and you're giving us a platform too. And I think we're chipping away at it. I think we have a long way to go, but I'm excited that people are just now starting to at least be more receptive to this problem. And we definitely need more resources. There are some available, but if we can develop more trauma-informed resources on the local level and build out as well, I think that'll benefit everyone. And then
Trish is a great salesman.
Yes, Trish.
She's a fantastic. She just looks you in the eye, and it's impossible. But I mean, for the need for shelters and organized systems to make this better.
Yeah, we need a lot more Trish and safe passages out in the world so that this becomes, a lot easier to get access or to have those resources and to feel comfortable enough to go to them and to then, leave your situation.
How do you want to get this? How do you want to get your film out to eyeballs?
Yeah, well, we're working on developing a community screening tour right now. So we're currently looking for sponsors and donors to join us in partnering to bring this to universities, law enforcement, people that are first responders, because that's who kind of shows up on the 911 call, right? Whoever is first boots on the ground. I think it's really important to get this story out there to those people who experience domestic violence in their work life as well, to kind of have that awareness and then to have a little bit of understanding as to what it might look like from the other side of things. And then we definitely are looking to secure distribution, hopefully on a local level, and then also be on a streaming platform eventually.
I talked to a Burbank cop. You're very familiar with Burbank. Mm-hmm. The majority of calls on a daily basis from the average patrolman is domestic violence calls.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Burbank Police, if you're listening, we want you to watch our film.
I think it's a great piece of work.
And let's talk about your production company and your vision and some of your goals and dreams or accomplishments. Like, fill us in a little bit about what you do over there.
Yeah, so She TV Media, full-service video production company, really dedicated to amplifying female-identifying and marginalized group stories. So Scars Unseen was sort of the big release and the starting point. I'm in development on our second feature documentary also at the moment. And really, I just believe so strongly, not only in Scars Unseen and this project, but also in the mission behind She TV Media. I believe so strongly that until women and minority voices are amplified and included at every single level of the filmmaking process and in media creation, we're going to see the same regurgitated content. Right? Nothing's going to change. Those systems are still going to operate the way that they have. And it's really important that if we want fresh voices and fresh perspectives, that they're told from whose people experience this firsthand. So
give us a little bit about your background and how you got into filmmaking.
Yeah, so I went to LMU. Shout out, go Lions. I was actually Iggy, the mascot, for a short stint.
I thought I recognized.
Ooh, yeah. You are
it's
celebrity.
The beard, isn't it? The big lion mane. Yeah, and I fell in love with documentaries. I took a filmmaking process after I banged on the door of the deans to add the second degree on, because that's kind of frowned upon. If you're in film only, and that's all you can dedicate your time. And I really wanted to have the ability to craft stories and use the journalistic perspective as well as have the knowledge to operate cameras and edit and shoot and do all these things. So I finally got them to say yes to that. So I got 2 degrees from LMU, and really through their documentary program, we went abroad to Bonn, Germany, and that was my first instance of making a short form doc in a foreign country. And
what was the topic?
That was completely opposite. That is my first guacumentary, and it's a comedic documentary about me trying to find guacamole and Mexican food whilst abroad in Germany.
Ooh,
so
tell us how it ends.
Yeah, spoiler alert, it's hard. It's rough.
Avocados don't grow in Germany.
Yeah, it's really challenging, but completely different. So I found kind of this balance also in the types of content that I create. I have a levity side, where I like to make mockumentaries and comedic films. And then I also have the hard-hitting documentary content that I really want to emphasize, especially with the release of Scars Unseen and my next feature doc, to really go into the untold sector and to give voice and amplify these stories that are often, hushed or not seen there.
Would you take submissions from outside people who have stories that follow your mandate a little bit like to put on your website or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm open for people definitely to join us in spreading the word about this as well. And anyone that has additional resources, I've also been building out a resource page for our documentary that's on the Scars Unseen website. So if people have those or have found anyone that's very helpful, any advocacy groups, any numbers to call, anything like that, and they want them included, they can definitely reach out.
What's the web address?
Oh, scarsunseen.com.
Oh, okay.
Or shetv.me, and you can find Scars Unseen through that homepage as well.
And can they watch this movie on your website?
You can watch the trailer on our website.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right now we're in festivals, so we got to keep that protected. But the trailer is out there. People can follow on social media. Any of the upcoming screenings I've been posting about as well, scarsunseen.com or Scars Unseen on Instagram and SheTV Media on Instagram.
Now, you are a bit of a polymath. You have written a children's book, and then you've co-written another book, which we'll get to. But first, let's talk about your book, Along Came Poppy.
Yes, I had no idea we were going to talk about that.
Come on, where's a book?
Along Came Poppy. I know, I could have brought one. Along Came Poppy. So I am just a storyteller. Like any medium, any way that I can tell stories, I kind of gravitate towards. And also having such a heavy topic, a lot of times I need another kind of outlet to balance it out. And I've always wanted to write a children's book, and my cousins and I always wrote spoofs on children's books just for fun when we were younger. And then a friend of ours had a baby girl named Poppy, and I immediately had this story come to mind, and I wrote it about this patch of grass that meets a friend in an unsuspecting place, and that looks can be deceiving. And I just felt like I'm going to write this book for Poppy, and then I decided I might as well share it with the world as well.
Has Poppy read the book?
Poppy has read the book.
There we go.
Yeah, Poppy's read the book. Poppy's also read, we kind of share it, but I gave it to her on her birthday, so that was really cool.
And then you're listed as a co-writer on The Game Changer.
Yes. I wrote a chapter in this book, and that's ultimately about carving your own space, kind of talking about SheTV Media and seeing if you don't see what you want out in the world, a lot of times, unfortunately, you have to create it. So that was kind of what SheTV Media was for me as well, and how I'm choosing to look at this filmmaking journey, looking at stories like, whoa, why haven't I heard anything about that? Or why aren't we talking about this subject? And kind of hone in on those and bring those forward into the light, and just really outlive, outlast, like be the last one regardless of your industry, but especially in the entertainment industry, like just to keep coming back, to keep showing up, to keep doing your craft, and to keep doing whatever that looks like for you, because it's almost a numbers game a lot of times, and the last one standing is kind of the mentality that I have to keep reminding myself of.
I like
That's
that.
A good, healthy outlook.
My motto is like just a little bit less fatalistic. I just say, be the first one there and the last one to leave.
I like it. We're in the same vein. Yeah, the outlive, outlast just came to me like not that long ago, a couple months, in this process. And I just think documentaries, especially, like a lot of things take a long time. It's challenges at every stage, but I feel like that's it for anything, right? Any creative form or not, just to keep pushing and to keep going forward, because if you're constantly waiting for permission a lot of times, and I think especially as a woman, I encountered that, and I'm like, well, why don't I just give myself permission? Why don't I just go out and do it?
Yeah, with docs, I made a doc, it took 8 years. So,
Yours took 4.5 years.
On day one, you're like, hey, I'm going to do this. And then 8 years later, you're like, oh my God, I'm still doing this.
But you finished it?
That's it.
Oh, yeah, it's on Amazon Prime. It's in Houses.
So you did it.
Yeah.
You kept it. You kept to it.
And it's a
that's
great
amazing.
piece of work. The thing about documentaries, and I've never done one, but watching Weezy do hers, and it's one of those things where it's an open-ended experience. Maybe not so much with yours, because you had 3 set pieces that you had to do, but with hers, you don't know where you're going to go. You don't know what the third act is going to be, and you just have to keep shooting. And sometimes it's not the movie you designed in the first place.
Yeah, I was tracking free-range cow sills.
Oh my gosh,
it was like all boots on the ground. Let's go.
Yeah.
No, it's a real-life family. So real life continues to happen while you're filming. I don't know if you encountered any of that. But
It definitely does. And I think that's why I'm leaning so hard into the community screening tour and to have these women speak about where they are now, right? Like this was just a time capsule of their
Yes.
lives, of where they were. And I think it's really important to focus on what they're doing now and for them to be
Yes.
present with, like they were at our premiere and we're able to speak on what they're doing now and, you know, how things have kind of changed for them since then. And I think that's really important to keep talking about.
And I also think for that same reason, it's important to tell people, you say, oh my God, I got to watch a movie about domestic abuse. That's not it. At the
Right.
end of each of these three scenarios, there's a really positive, wonderful story of redemption and rebirth for each of these women, but a different way.
Yeah, that's something, if I can get on my soapbox for a minute.
Please.
I really want to emphasize, especially with this film, that this, like you're saying, people hear domestic violence and they immediately think of a stereotype or a specific one size fits all or one scenario, right? But this film really focuses on like the resiliency of these women. And I hope people walk away with the understanding and empowerment that you can reclaim your narrative and you can change what that narrative is. And I think that we all can benefit from, you know, not giving voice and dramatizing abuse like the media oftentimes does. And it really focuses on the abuser and the act of the abuse. And while that is part of the story, I think it's more beneficial for us to focus on the uplifting and the after. What happens once you're out of it? What does that healing process look like? What does your day-to-day life look like? And give a little bit of a glimpse as to what your life could be like, and to really emphasize the positive and powerful outcome, because we've had enough of we've seen enough of the terrible things, and we've become so desensitized. And I think it's really important as a filmmaker or as a media maker to be conscientious as to what you're putting on screen and how you're portraying this. And if it's a narrative film and you do incorporate a domestic violence situation, to really think about what purpose is this scene, or what purpose is this serving? Why am I including it? Is it for drama? Is it serving a plot purpose, you know? And kind of really be conscientious, because like art imitates life and life imitates art, and we need to be more conscientious about what we're putting on screen.
You know, you could go to work at Warner Brothers as the vice president in charge of conscience.
Oh.
And you could teach people, you know.
We seem to be fairly addicted to gore.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
that's
I
the
don't know
trouble.
if it's the whole, you know, true crime
Yeah.
sort of wave, or the moment where, you know, everyone can go online and try to solve a crime, or if we've always slowed down to look at an accident, or if we're all hardwired in a certain type of way to where we go to war with one another. But I'm currently watching the new version of Presumed Innocence. And
I love that. The one with Jake Gyllenhaal?
It's just a lot of visual gore
Yeah.
interwoven with sex. And so all these primal parts of our brain are being activated and then overlapped in ways that I don't think are good for us. I mean, it is a good show, Fritz.
Well, I mean, the gore's in flashback. They're
But
going
it's
back.
constant.
Yeah.
It's porn. Like,
Yeah.
it's just gore porn, if that's a thing, or gore.
And I
don't
think
know.
it's because we're just inundated and we don't even stop to think about what we're consuming anymore.
I do, because I'm trying to eat. Like, this is gross. I
It's taken
can't.
Become desensitized
we've become
to it.
desensitized, and it is overwhelming. But I feel like there's enough's enough. Like, we need more content that is positive and that is, you know, not gonna ruin you subconsciously, even though you don't know. Maybe watching that show, you think you're okay, and then you like 2 days later, you feel sick to your stomach about seeing something similar or something like that.
That's
you know?
what I loved about Trying. It just seemed like these were civil, wonderful, ordinary people just trying to get by.
It is a
Yeah.
Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso.
feel.
Yeah, it was really
I mean,
lovely.
it says a lot, though, that how popular Ted Lasso was,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like,
Say
it's
a
like
lot.
we're also craving those
Yes.
good, feel-good stories.
Community and humanity and all that stuff.
Yeah, we need to restore our faith in humanity.
We don't want to leave before we talk about the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Tell me about that. Where is it? What is it? How can people access
I
it?
can read it off on the website if you would like.
Oh no, you don't have to do that. But that's a
Yes.
place for people to go if
That's
they're having an
a place for
immediate-
people to call. There's a lot of also local resources that you can call, but the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 24/7 and available. They also have resources on their website. I believe we linked to it on the Scars Unseen page as well. And there are even locally places that you can chat or you can text now instead of calling if you don't feel comfortable or maybe you're not in a position to call, that you can also message as well.
Oh, that's
I believe they have a texting line as well.
ScarsUnseen.com.
Well, I just want to say before we wrap this up that Mason went ahead and propped up her little flyer on top of my vintage Kamala mug, and I would rather you prop it up on the Fritz said it would be like this billboard so that we can give a shout out to Team Kamala.
What a selfish thing to say. You know, you want the one to cover up my billboard.
I do.
And that,
Yeah, I do. Thank you.
I have a feeling this is a long-seated debate.
To be continued.
This is a wonderful piece of work, and I think it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say you're going to save lives getting this into the front of the right eyeballs, and it would be a great learning experience. And even for people who haven't experienced domestic violence, but it might be in their family. Mm-hmm. They may have seen it from afar. Great piece of work. Hope you find a home for it.
I want to say also, sorry to cut you off.
No, I'm done.
This film is just an example of a family that endured abuse. You are walking by people, you are working with people, you know people, and you do not know what has gone on in their household. Mm-hmm. The Cowsills were all victims of abuse. Ugh. They were singing on TV while the abuse was going on, and they
putting on a squeaky happy face.
They carried on, but it's just an example of how abuse affects us in ways that we don't even know because someone that we work next to who has a bad temper or who looked at us in a type of way that didn't feel good or whatever, we don't know what their morning was like. Mm-hmm. And so let's just all be kind.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what we don't know what everyone is going through.
Totally. You never know what's going on behind closed doors, so you might as well be the friend.
Are you allowed to tell us what your next project is? Or?
Yeah, I can tell you.
Let's go.
My next project's called Vulva Revolution, and it's about starting a sexual health revolution specifically in women's health care. So I've partnered with Dr. Maria Uloko, who is one of 7 urologists in the nation, specially trained to treat sexual health of all genders. And it's a crazy statistic to know that only 50% of our medical schools require you to study the female sexual health.
What?
Wow.
Yeah. When you know that, and then you look at the suboptimal care and how, medical gaslighting is
Why do you think that
such
is?
an issue.
It seems weird. It's 50% of the population.
It is. Thank you. You get it. That's the whole point. It's like, how is it possible that 50% of the population bodies haven't even been studied? It wasn't until, 2014, I believe, that lab rats for diseases and for prevention were required to have male and female lab rats.
Come on, doctors. It would be better for business.
Yeah, we need more research and we need more funding in order to go through these. And so this project kind of dissects a little bit of the history as to where we have been, the start of gynecology and what that looked like, present day, and then also how femtech and a lot of these companies are trying to bridge the gap between, where the medical systems and care is letting us down.
Wonderful. Good
so here's another follow-up question to that. Do you feel like women get less, I don't know how to phrase this, women's health care is less significant than men's in the United States?
Well, women are definitely more likely to be gaslit or to have their symptoms kind of pushed to the side or to say, maybe it's really bad period pain, maybe it's hormones. Have you thought about, going off of birth control, or have you thought about doing this? Women's pain has kind of been almost always historically not believed, and even the, origination of the term hysteria.
Yeah,
it's a medical emergency if someone can't get a boner in states where you're not allowed to get an abortion.
Yes. No, it's
there are
insane
states where you're not allowed to get a boner?
An abortion.
Oh, an abortion. Oh.
But it's critical that men can still have an erection.
Yes.
In states where women cannot have any control over what happens.
Somebody was talking about what made Kamala Harris a great prosecutor, and she was interviewing in Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing. She asked him a great question. She said, how many laws are there that restrict men's physical activities? And there's hushed silence in the courtroom.
Right. So, yeah, that's it's definitely what you're delving into is a very, it's a topic that will open up many lines of conversation.
Yeah,
We wish you luck.
Thank you.
Yes.
We will need it.
Yes. Well, here come our closing credits. Thanks for coming along down the media path. Let's continue this conversation on Instagram and Twitter, where we are at Media Path Pod, and on Facebook, where our show page is Media Path Podcast, and our Facebook group is Media Path with Fritz and Weezy Podcast Community. We are also a video podcast, so if you're only listening, you can actually turn on your TV, turn it to the YouTube, and watch us. And we're very, very attractive. So then there's also lots of additional content. Watch us and subscribe at Media Path Podcast. Fritz, did you know my TikTok just went to 2,000 followers? So if you do not have the patience to watch the entire show, you can watch it 3 minutes at a time on TikTok. Yeah, that's the good news. Write to us at mediapathpodcast@gmail.com. Kindly give us a nice rating wherever you get your podcasts, and share our social media posts, because that's a big help. Our website is mediapathpodcast.com. Head over there to catch up on every episode and to read our spicy newsletter. It is loaded with bonus photos and quizzes and fun backstage gossip. We want to thank our wonderful guest, Meredith Yinger. Our team includes producer Dina Friedman, John Maddox, Bill Filipiak, Mason Brown, Garrett Arch, Raf Rusak, Jordan Reyes, and you. Our theme music is by me and John Maddox. I am Louise Planker here with Fritz Coleman. Be well and wise, and we will see you along the media path.